Alright, this is part 3 of this video on how to do a valve clearance adjustment on a Honda Prelude. Just to review, we got the valve cover off, the car is lifted, and we've rotated the engine so that the number 1 cylinder is at top dead center. And at this point we can start the adjustment of the valves. To actually check the valve adjustment, we're going to need one of these, which is a feeler gauge, and there's a different width setting that you use for the intake cylinder and the intake valves and the exhaust valves. We're going to start by doing the intake ones first. For those, I've chosen to use a 0.004 inch feeler gauge gap. So in order to set the gap, what needs to be done is first we need to get out a 12mm socket and just loosen off the lock nut on the adjustment screw. So that's these ones right here, there and there. Just drop the socket on there. They'll probably be a little bit snug, and you just have to loosen them off. What I can now do is I can use the feeler gauge, and I can just take a flat-headed screwdriver, insert the feeler gauge in between the camshaft and the lifter, and just turn the adjust screw a little bit until I feel a slight amount of drag. Hopefully you can see that. That feels about right. So when I feel like I've got the right amount, I don't want to move the adjust screw, and I want to take an open-ended wrench and just lock off that lock nut, and then we can torque them to the right amount later, just so the adjust screw doesn't move any. Do this other side here. So just take hold of the adjust screw, put the feeler gauge in, turn the adjust screw as necessary to get that slight amount of drag that Honda suggests. Not too much, not too little. Sometimes it's a little hard to find that spot. That feels about right. Take our open-ended wrench, double check. Yeah, those two feel good. Okay, so from this we've done the intake side, so now we can go to the exhaust side. In order to go to the exhaust side, we're going to have to use a different measurement on the feeler gauge. So for the exhaust side, we set the feeler gauge. I'm using 0.007 inches or 0.178 millimeters. To the exhaust side, we really just use the same routine. We take our ratchet with the 12mm socket, loosen up the lock nut on the valve rocker. Those ones can be tight. Take our feeler gauge, drop it in between the lobe of the camshaft and the rocker of the valve, and we check that there's a slight amount of drag. If we need to make an adjustment, we can do that just by turning the adjust screw. Check both exhaust valves for the number 1 cylinder, which is the one we're on. And if everything is good, if the measurements are right, then we use our 12mm open-ended wrench, and making sure that the check screw doesn't move, we lock off those adjust nuts so that nothing gets away on us. We've done the intake and the exhaust of the number 1 cylinder. The next cylinder that we actually do is the number 3 cylinder. And the reason for that is that because of the firing order of the engine, as we turn the engine, the next cylinder that will be lined up at top dead center is the number 3, is we want the up mark to come in line with the plane of the head, and then this notch will be pointing straight up and down, and that will bring the number 3 cylinder into top dead center. We're only spinning the camshaft a quarter turn, no big deal. Spin, and then right there. So we see the notch mark is now at the top, and the up mark on the cam pulley is in line with the plane of the head surface. Okay, so we're ready to adjust the valves on the number 3 piston. To do that, since I've already got the feeler gauge set up for the exhaust valve, we'll start there, because that's where we finished off on the number 1. Check them first. They both actually feel pretty good. So if no adjustment is needed, you can leave it be. To do the adjustment anyway, socket onto there. Loosen off the lock nuts, which will be a little bit tight. Perfect. Then we use our feeler gauge together with a flat-headed screwdriver. Make adjustments as needed to get a slight amount of drag happening in there. That's all you want, just a slight amount. We make sure that the adjust screw doesn't move at all, and we take our open end 12mm wrench and just tighten those off enough to keep them from moving. For now, we'll go through and torque them all properly a little bit later on. So at this point, we're ready now to move over to the intake side. So we adjust our feeler gauge back to the intake size, drop the socket on, good solid push, and the lock nut breaks free. And then we use a flat-headed screwdriver together with our feeler gauge. Little adjustments, tighten it up a bit, check again. We want a slight amount of drag when you're sliding it in there. Feels about right. Check this one. Still too loose. You just tighten it just a bit. Remember, as you do this, these are minute changes that you're making, so small turns are usually sufficient to bring things into where they need to be. And there's that slight amount of drag that Honda talks about. Make sure that the adjust screw doesn't move as we tighten them off. And there. So the next cylinder that we're going to do is going to be the number 4 one. So we need to bring the number 4 cylinder to top dead center. We rotate the camshaft another quarter turn. So the up mark will now be pointing straight down, and again those 2 notches in each camshaft gear will be in line with the plane of the head. So I'm going to rotate a quarter turn. I'm going to do the number 4 cylinder, this one, the one closest to the transmission. And then at that point I rotate again a quarter turn and I do the valve adjustments on the number 2 cylinder. And that's pretty much the procedure to adjust the valves. And at that point, when we get there, please tune in to the next part of this video series, and we'll reassemble everything